Welcome into Saturday Morning Conversation. I'm Bobby Burton, brought to you by our friends over at Tito's, America's Handmade Vodka. We'll tell you a little bit more about them later. I'm Bobby Burton, along with CJ Vogel, Jeff Howe, and Rod Babers. It is our weekly Saturday conversation. We got a few questions we're going to get to. Let's start with the Texas Longhorns and their portal efforts. I want to ask the panelists this question. There's no doubt that Texas has to go to the portal for offensive line. There's no doubt. They're losing 3 interior guys. Trevor Gooseby gets ranked number 15 overall at Matt Miller's NFL mock draft. What's he going to do now, given that? So, given that we know offensive line's imperative, outside of offensive line, what's next most important? CJ, I'll ask you, buddy.
Yeah, I'll start on the defensive side. Because again, towards the back end, and I'll go specifically in the secondary, and we'll see if it's a corner. I think most importantly, it's a safety there in the back end. But if you lose Michael Taft, you lose Jelani McDonald, let's say those two end up headed off to the NFL, right? That leaves you in a spot where you don't have a lot of experience in the back end. We talk a whole lot about experience, communication, just that cohesion in the back end. Texas looked a lot like that 2023 team towards the back end of the season, where it felt like things were moving in the right direction, but you were a big play seemingly every other possession from allowing easy points from scoring. So I'm looking at the safety spot saying you got to get someone back there with some valuable snaps, some big experience playing on the road and these big Power 5 games, Power 4 games. I think that's very important. Of course, the offense needs some work, but safety for me is a sneaky spot that I'm looking at saying, go get yourself a stud.
What about you, Jeff? Outside of offensive line, number one priority in the portal?
For me, it's running back, because I think you've got a chance to really make over that room, number one. Number two, if you want to get this running game on track, yes, you've got to do it with the offensive line, but you've got to have running backs that can maximize yards. You've got to have a stable of backs. And I think this portal cycle is much more conducive to Texas going out and getting the quality back in the portal than it was last year. Like, you look at where Texas was last year, right? Trey Wisner's coming off a 1,000-yard season. The staff, even though it might have been a miscalculation, figured, hey, we're going to get CJ Baxter back healthy. Jarrett Gibson going into year 2. You got James Simon as a true freshman. Christian Clark coming off the injury. Like, they probably felt really good at running back, but they just, again, like a couple of positions on offense, I think just left too many things to chance. You look at it now, if Trey Wisner goes pro, which I wouldn't blame him at all if he did, I think it might be time for him to just go on to the next level. I think CJ Baxter's got a decision to make on his future. We'll see what happens with Christian Clark, like I saw from James Simon. But you bring in Derek Cooper mainly, and then Jet Walker. We'll see. I think he's going to play mostly on special teams. But I think you can go tell a legitimate number one back in the portal, look, we've got a freshman, and we don't know really what else we've got. Other than this freshman, we feel really good about. So I think you've got a chance to really remake the running back room and get this running game back on track, because we saw, Bobby, there were times where Sark didn't have any faith in it. And why would he? You've got to get back to the point where you can at least have some confidence in your run game.
Got to have a power running back in this thing. All right, what do you think, Rod? What was your must-have beyond the offensive line?
I think both CJ and Jeff hit two of the key areas. If I'm going to add something to it, I think I'd go in the front on the defense, right? Whether you're talking about another linebacker to add, you're going to lose Anthony Hill, one of the best linebackers in the country. Trey Moore is one of the guys that was getting you some reps there. You're young at that linebacker position, inexperienced, and I think getting a guy who's actually proven himself at the power 4 level at the linebacker position, or the interior D line, or I should say the interior D line is somewhere else. I would attack in the portal as well. So I'm looking at kind of the central nervous system, kind of the guts,
middle.
The guts of that defense. I'd go interior D line, and I'd try to give me a linebacker that can thud up with the physicality of the SEC. Considering you're losing Anthony Hill, and the linebackers you have coming up are a little inexperienced. I do like Brad Spence. He may move over there, so you could get some experience there. But I think they still want to use him in a role where he's versatile and can move around. You want to get yourself kind of an every down off ball linebacker if you can find one in the portal.
Interesting. You and CJ both went up the middle of the defense, Rod.
Mm-hmm.
At safety and linebacker, defensive tackle. Look, I think they need a disruptor at defensive tackle, like a true disruptor. But I'm not sure those guys are going to be readily available in the portal. The one position I actually think outside of offensive line for me is wide receiver. I think they need a bona fide bad dude at wide receiver to join with what they have. Now, I think that maybe one or two of the existing wide receivers are going to end up in the portal. That's just the numbers kind of tell me that. But I think Texas needs somebody that's going to be a bad dude to mix with a Ryan Wingo that gives Texas not just in Arch Manning. I mean, look, we can say what we want, but this offense next year needs to score a lot of points. And if they get the offensive line, the next thing for me is playmakers and touchdown scorers. And I didn't think Texas had enough of those this year.
Yeah.
I mean, they just didn't. And that was part of the problem. And one of the several reasons the offense, I think, stuttered and sputtered at the start of the season. I really do believe that. So I would go wide receiver. That's going to be, I think, different than what most people say. But I think we're all in agreement here. Texas clearly, CJ, needs a lot of things if they're truly going to go all in 2026.
Yeah, and there's no reason not to, right? You have Arch Manning. You have a senior Arch Manning, right? You have a lot of returning pieces. And, I don't know if there are many coaches or programs in the country who could look at, one, the quarterback of their offense and the quarterback of their defense in this instance would be Colin Simmons and say, hey, we're in a better spot than the University of Texas. There's probably not really any schools you could make the argument when it comes to the best player on both sides of the ball that will be returning for 2026. This is a great opportunity, and I think it's one where I think the staff will correct itself from a year ago, right? Texas, they made some nice adjustments. They made some nice additions out of the portal a year ago. But when it comes back to it, I think that there were certainly some meat left on the bone that they could have added out of the portal a year ago, and it would have greatly improved this product that we saw on the field in 2025.
Rod, are you overwhelmed by how much Texas needs to do in the portal, or you think it's achievable?
I think it's achievable. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of the circumstances of the portal, right? You can only maximize what is presented to you in the portal as a program. So if they don't have the whatever the personnel that you need, if they don't have the necessary positions that you require to help you kind of manage this roster, that can be very difficult. I mean, kind of rolling the dice on the portal, because you may have to take some chances on guys that aren't necessarily the high caliber proven commodities you want at a certain position. If like O-line right now, and maybe like at running back, you got to have guys, like you have to. And you don't have as much leverage in that situation too, because we know there's a lot of negotiations that go along with transfer portal acquisition. So it does. I mean, I think it does put me in a very kind of anxious mood, thinking about Texas being so dependent on the portal at key positions like O-line and running back. But I do think Sark and Brandon Harris have done a pretty good job of addressing needs in the portal. And maybe they feel the D tackle. We were like, oh man, what are they gonna do at D tackle? And Sark was almost cocky and arrogant about, oh no, we'll get our guys at D tackle. Don't y'all worry about that. And we end up getting 4 or 5 different D tackles. So I do have faith that they will prioritize and emphasize and get it done.
Jeff, I can go to you about this. Rod says it's achievable based on what's available. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of different coaches. Eli Drinkowitz at Missouri came out and said he expects this to be a madhouse in the portal this year, more so than ever. You agree with that statement?
Yeah, because especially now, look, I know the coaches had been planning on it, but especially now with the vote that was passed Friday by the SEC presidents to go from 85 scholarships to 105. So now, along with the war chest, now you got more scholarships to play with. And I think about what you, Bobby, said and what Rod said also, and I'll back you guys up on that from this standpoint. I think when you look at wide receiver, this staff has shown that they can go into the portal and get really good wide receivers. Like they can really identify wide receivers. And Rod, you've said it for years, and I agree with you 100%. Wide receiver is probably the deepest position in football at both levels, in college and in the NFL. So you don't have to spend tippy top dollar to get like a number one type wide receiver in the portal. So some of this is going to come down to evaluation and making sure your personnel department's on point. And, talking about adding a guy, Rod, you mentioned defensive front. I would say, hey, maybe if you can close the deal, this Texas defense, they would have loved to have had David Bailey on this defense, but I think you kind of got to earmark a spot, one of those on offense and one of those on defense. Like think about, hey, like a Jaden Blue on offense and a David Bailey on defense. I need a guy on offense that's just a playmaker. I don't care. We can put him at running back in the slot, split him out wide, whatever. I need a guy that makes explosive plays happen and can get the ball in the end zone. And then on defense, I need a guy that can affect the quarterback, whether that's an edge, a DT, a linebacker, whatever. So I think you've got to look for disruptors and you got to look for game changers and maybe just earmark a couple of spots for those guys, regardless of what position they play.
You can't put a price tag on game impact. And that's what you're talking about. Disruptors and touchdown makers. Those are priceless. I mean, and I say that, and I know every single agent's ears prickle up and start getting excited about the guys that they've got on their list. But look, we got more portal talk to discuss a couple other things today. But first, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Tito's Handmade Vodka. They are a proud sponsor of your Texas Longhorns, distilled and bottled by Fifth Generation Inc., Austin, Texas. 40% alcohol by volume. They ask you to savor responsibly. Again, that's Tito's Handmade Vodka, proud sponsor of the Texas Longhorns, and every Saturday conversation in the morning on Saturdays this football season. We appreciate them very much. Another question I have for you guys as it relates to the portal. Do you think Texas is an attractive place for a portal player? Think about that. I mean, do you think Texas is it more attractive than going to, say, Maryland? I mean, what if Maryland can pay you $50,000 more or $100,000 more, right? Because they have more revenue share available. What do we think about that? Rod, I'm going to ask you that first because you're a former player.
If it's are we talking about a large disparity between the dollar figures that are being met? Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, these days, Jerry talks about it all the time. It's more transactional recruiting and talent acquisition is. So I totally get that. These guys have to make business decisions. But if you're talking about a close negotiation in terms of dollar figure, maybe Texas is not overpaying for a player or matching that. What that player has. Texas, the University of Texas, has a lot of kind of added value that you can pitch and you can sell. Whether it be the city of Austin becoming a pop culture mecca, whether it be with the alumni base and donor base and how affluent and actually how large it is and how the networking part of it as well. They talk about the University of Texas and where it's ranked in terms of its educational academic status as a university. Like there are a lot of added bonuses to go on the University of Texas. I'm not hating on Maryland, but I imagine there's more added value going to Texas, what the degree means, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, more legitimacy to what they're talking about. What about you, CJ? You think that Texas is going to have? I'll ask you a little bit different question. Do you think Texas is going to have a hard time filling these needs to the level they need to this year?
No, and I say that because I think they're going to be uber aggressive in making sure that all of these needs are filled. And, specifically on the offensive line, like we're talking about, Jeff, those instant impact, game-changing level guys, if they come around and Texas finds a hole or a need for them, I think Texas understands that this is their window. This is a year where they need to go all in. So, no, and they shouldn't, right? There shouldn't be much. And obviously there will be, but there shouldn't be much of a hesitancy for Texas when it comes to going out and finding guys that they find or that they deem to be game changers or someone that they could use in this offense or defense. The point is, and going back to your point, Rod, in today's NIL portal era, everybody's a mercenary. You put your name in the hat of the portal. Well, you're basically a for-hire soldier and you go join the army that pays you the most. Now, sometimes you fight up in the cold. Sometimes you fight down where it's nice and tropical, right? There's different factors, and sometimes you get a nice little education in a campfire at night. I think Texas offers a lot of that for some of these soldiers. So that's part of what makes Texas, a desirable place to go play out of the portal. On top of that, hey, you could be fighting to go take over the whole realm, which is the national championship. Texas right now has its sights on that. So all of that going into it, I think Texas is looking for the best players, and I think that they're going to be uber as aggressive as we've seen this staff be out of the portal. And that's absolutely the case that should be happening this offseason.
Jeff, you agree with that? You think Texas is going to be able to fill their needs?
Yeah. To piggyback off what Rod and CJ said, whatever you want out of the portal, you can get it at Texas. You want to go to the NFL? Sark has proven this organization can get you there. You want to compete for championships? They can get you there. You want to improve your brand? What better way to do that than to be attached to maybe the biggest brand in college sports? You want, to be in a place that's lively and vibrant. What better than one of the pop culture capitals of America? So whatever you want at Texas, you can get it. And to CJ's point, look, I think we got to remember, they don't have the spring window. Like, they've attacked the portal very strategically. And you could almost say, well, we didn't get this done in the winter window, but we can maybe get it in the spring window. Or even in the spring window, you could say, well, we've got maybe a freshman coming in that can help here, or, we like the way this guy developed in spring ball. Maybe we don't need to attack that. Now, you got one shot. You got a couple of weeks to get this right. And I think for Sark, to me, Bobby, it's about maximizing not just the window you've got with Arch Manning, which is probably one more year, but the further along we get into the NIL and portal and rev share era, I don't know that you can look longer than a year down the road. In some aspects of your program, you can when it comes to player development and things like that, but you can't be thinking, hey, how's this going to impact us in 2027 and 2028? You've got to do the next couple of weeks thinking about what's going to happen in the next 12 months. That's the window you've got to look at.
Win now, baby. That's what you're saying, and I agree with you. But it's particularly prescient and important for Texas because the timeline of Arch Manning. And you got somebody on defense right now that's pretty damn close to that for his position in Colin Simmons. You don't have those two guys on campus very often at the same time and in the same year, essentially. So I feel like you guys are onto something. And I would say this, my take on it is I do know that Texas is ready to go in the portal. Like, they're ready to meet this thing head on, excited about it, even anticipating it. They're ready, and it'll be the opportunity beyond even what we saw in recruiting this past week. It'll be their opportunity to remake this football team in 2026. Because there are going to be, I agree with what Eli Drinkwitz said at Missouri when he said it's going to be the most crazy portal ever, because every single player out there now feels like the portal is a possibility or a reality for them. I think it's changing. I think that this will be a crazy one, and a lot of big time players, more than usual the last couple of years, will use their opportunity to leverage themselves in the portal. We'll see what that means for Texas and even the players that Texas is trying to retain to some level. Well, but anyways, all right, that's going to do it for today's Saturday conversation. Thanks again to our friends over at Tito's. Tito's is America's handmade vodka and proud sponsor of your Texas Longhorns, distilled and bottled by Fifth Generation Inc., Austin, Texas. 40% alcohol by volume. Savor responsibly. Again, that's Tito's handmade vodka, proud sponsor of your Texas Longhorns. All right, we'll be back with more later today. We got several different discussions going on. There's some big games coming up. Got to wonder what's going to happen to Alabama, guys. If they get trounced by Georgia, are they still going to be in the playoffs? Also, upset Virginia and upset the apple cart that is the college football playoff. A lot of things at stake later today. For Rod Babers, for CJ Vogel and Jeff Howell, as well as our producer, Matt Hutchinson, I'm Bobby Burton. Thank y'all for watching Hook 'em Horns.